All right, let's cut through the noise. We've all been swimming in AI hype for what feels like forever, right? But what's actually happening inside real companies right now in 2026? So let's dive in and try to separate the reality from the buzz. We're going to look at the rise of something called AI agents, figure out why so many companies are getting stuck, and uncover the real gap, the thing that's holding pretty much everyone back.
It really wasn't that long ago, was it? I mean, think back to 2024. That was the year the entire world just stopped and realized we could have a real, intelligent conversation with a machine. And it would talk back. It was a complete shock to the system.
But fast forward to today, and wow, the game has completely changed. We are so far beyond just talking to machines now. It's more like we're handing them the keys to the car and, just hoping they know how to drive. The stakes are just infinitely higher.
And that brings us to the first really big shift. We are officially in what people are calling the age of the agent. And this isn't just a small update, it's a completely new paradigm. It's a massive evolution from the simple chatbots we all got used to.
Okay, so what's the actual difference? It sounds kind of similar, but it's simple and, honestly, profound. A chatbot, it answers your questions. It's like a conversational partner. But an agent executes tasks. It doesn't just talk, it acts.
And what's really cool is how it takes that action. See, an agent has autonomy. So let's imagine a customer wants a refund. The agent doesn't just say, okay, I'll look into it. No. First, it has to reason, break down the goal into smaller steps. Then, it uses tools to, say, query your internal sales systems. After that, it has to make a decision based on your company's actual refund policy. And then, it takes the action. It calls the payment API to process the refund. And to top it all off, it communicates the outcome back to the customer. It's this multi-step, totally independent workflow that changes everything.
Now, this incredible new power has created this huge paradox in the business world. On one hand, the promise is absolutely massive, but on the other, well, we have this thing people are calling pilot purgatory, and it is a great divide. It's exactly where most companies are getting stuck.
Okay, let's start with the promise side of things. Just look at this number, 78%. That's how many organizations are now using AI in some way, shape, or form. Adoption is it's through the roof. I mean, it's basically everywhere.
But here's the big reality check. And this image really illustrates the problem perfectly. Even with that massive adoption rate, only 13% of companies say they have widespread deployment. And get this, nearly a third are still just stuck in pilot programs. They're experimenting, they're testing, but they're not fully committing. This is the deployment gap.
And yeah, there's a perfect name for this state of being stuck. Pilot purgatory. It's that phase where the tech totally works. The demo looks amazing, but actually making it reliable and affordable and compliant for the entire company, well, that's where the dream dies for a lot of them.
So who's actually powering all these new agents? Well, it turns out the market has really settled around 3 major players. And what's interesting is that each one has a very different philosophy on how to build this kind of intelligence. All right, here's your quick cheat sheet on the big 3. First, you've got OpenAI with GPT. They're still the best in class for just pure reasoning. Think of it as the raw intelligence engine. Then you've got Google's Gemini, which is the big ecosystem play. Its major advantage is that huge context window, and of course, its deep integration with all the Google tools we already use. And finally, you have Anthropic's Claude. They've really cornered the market on governance. It's the super safe, reliable choice for industries like law or healthcare, where, mistakes are just not an option.
So, theory is one thing, but the real lessons are always learned out in the wild. So let's look at some real-world examples, some huge wins, some pretty spectacular wrecks, and the harsh reality of what happens when you actually deploy this tech.
For massive win, you've got to look at Coca-Cola. They built something they call a creative operating system. Now, this is brilliant. Instead of fighting the AI's tendency to hallucinate or make stuff up, they just embraced it. They basically rebranded it as creativity. And it works because marketing has a much higher tolerance for error, right? So it was the perfect playground for AI to just shine, generating these hyper-personalized ads at a scale nobody had ever seen before.
And then there's the wreck. Oh boy. Taco Bell tried to automate its drive-thrus with voice AI. So, what was the problem? Well, a drive-thru is a noisy, chaotic place with tons of different accents. And ordering a taco is what's called a deterministic task. You want one specific thing, but these big AI models are probabilistic. They make educated guesses. And the result? A complete viral disaster. Misunderstood accents everywhere, people getting orders for like 18,000 cups of water. They just used the completely wrong tool for the job.
And this whole thing brings us to a really crucial point about liability. Check this out. Air Canada's chatbot gave a customer some bad info. So when they went to court, the airline argued, and I'm not making this up, that the chatbot was a separate legal entity and that they weren't responsible for it. As you can imagine, the court basically laughed that argument out of the room. The ruling was crystal clear. If you deploy an AI, you own its output. Period. The old vendor defense is officially dead.
So you have to ask, right? Why the huge difference? How can AI be so brilliant at creating a Coke ad, but fail so spectacularly at taking a simple taco order? What is the real bottleneck here? What's going on?
Well, it turns out the biggest challenge is they're not really technical anymore. The real bottleneck is us. It's the human element. It's all about the people and the organizations they work in.
And this right here from the Cadio report really says it all. The people gap is the #1 barrier. A full 60% of leaders, think about that, it meant that their inability to properly upskill their own teams is the top obstacle holding them back. So they have the tech, but they don't have the talent.
Okay, so what skills are companies desperately looking for? Well, here's a shocker. It's not just about coding. Look at the top 3. Number 1 is AI oversight and governance. Basically, people who can manage the risk. Number 2 is applied AI usage. This is everything from prompt engineering to just knowing how to use the tools effectively in your job. And number 3, data literacy. See the pattern? These are all human-centric skills.
But here's a really counterintuitive effect we're starting to see. For really experienced developers, AI can actually slow them down. It's been described as supervising a hyper-fast intern. Sure, it generates a mountain of code in seconds, but then the senior developer has to spend all their time carefully checking it for subtle bugs. It just breaks their flow and can end up costing them more time than it saves.
So when you add all of this up, you realize we're in a completely new strategic landscape. Businesses now have to navigate this brand new world that has totally different rules for security, for liability, and for a global market that is frankly splittering apart.
So what are the new rules of this agentic age? Well, there are 3 big ones. First, security. The #1 threat is now prompt injection. That's basically tricking the AI into doing something it shouldn't. Second, liability. We saw this with Air Canada. You are 100% responsible for every single thing your AI says and does. And third, geopolitics. The world is breaking up into these different AI zones. You've got the US, the EU, and China, and they all have different rules that you have to follow.
And this all leads to a really powerful takeaway for the future of work. The big job of the future, it's not prompt engineer. That's just a skill, like typing. The real career is going to be something like an agent orchestrator. That's the person who manages a whole fleet of both human and AI agents, making sure they're all working together, staying on budget, and, not causing total chaos.
So we'll leave you with this final thought. The simple chatbot era? It's over. The age of the agent has officially begun. The technology is already here, so the only real question left to answer is, are your people ready to lead it?